The rain hadn't stopped all day. It drummed gently against the roof of the small blue house on Maple Street, just outside Portland, Oregon. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old wood, dust, and forgotten memories. Evelyn Carter, 22 years old, stood in her late grandmother's attic, surrounded by boxes stacked higher than her shoulders. The light bulb above flickered every few seconds, making the shadows jump around her like restless ghosts. Her grandmother, Margaret Carter, had passed away 2 months ago. It was still hard to believe she was gone. Margaret had been the heart of the family, always smiling, always baking pies, always telling Evelyn stories about the old days. But there was one thing she never talked about. Evelyn's mother. Evelyn's mother had died when Evelyn was just a baby. Her father never shared details, and whenever Evelyn asked, he'd simply say, "It's better you don't know too much, sweetheart." But today, something was about to change that forever. Evelyn knelt beside a box labeled, "Private, do not open," in faded black marker. It looked older than the others, sealed with yellowing tape. Her heart began to beat faster. She hesitated for a moment. Should I really open this? Then she whispered to herself, "Grandma's gone, maybe she wanted me to." She carefully peeled away the tape. Inside, she found a stack of photographs, black and white, some with smiling faces she didn't recognize. There were also a few letters tied with a red ribbon. One envelope stood out. It was addressed neatly in her grandmother's handwriting, to Evelyn. "For when you are ready to know." Evelyn froze. The words felt heavy, like they were meant to change something. She sat down on the dusty floor and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper was fragile, the ink slightly faded, but the message was clear. "My dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. There is something I have kept hidden, a secret that has followed our family for many years. It is about your mother, and it is about you. I wanted to tell you earlier, but the truth can be painful, and I wanted to protect you from that pain. Now that you are grown, you have the strength to face it. You must find the blue chest I kept in the basement. Inside it, you will find the beginning of the truth. With all my love, Grandma Margaret." Evelyn's heart pounded. A blue chest. She had seen one in the basement earlier that morning, but thought it was just full of old Christmas decorations. She read the letter again, this time more slowly. Every word pulled her deeper into confusion and curiosity. What could her grandmother mean by the beginning of the truth? Suddenly, the light bulb flickered once more and went out completely. The attic fell silent and dark. Evelyn's phone flashlight cut through the gloom as she stood up, her mind spinning. Somewhere downstairs, the house creaked softly, as if it, too, had something to say. Evelyn took a deep breath. Tomorrow, she would open that blue chest, and maybe then, she would finally understand who she really was. The next morning, sunlight finally broke through the clouds over Portland, Oregon. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening and fresh. Inside the old Carter house, Evelyn woke early, still thinking about the letter she had found in the attic. She couldn't sleep much that night. Her mind kept replaying her grandmother's words. "You must find the blue chest I kept in the basement. Inside it, you will find the beginning of the truth." Evelyn poured herself a cup of coffee and walked slowly toward the basement door. It creaked as she opened it, the smell of old paint and damp concrete filling her nose. She switched on the light. The single bulb flickered for a moment before glowing steadily. There it was, the blue chest, old, heavy, and covered in dust. It sat against the far wall beneath a shelf of empty jars. Evelyn's heart started to race. She knelt in front of it and ran her hand over the lid. The paint was chipped in places, and the metal lock was rusted. She tried to open it, but it didn't budge. "Of course," she sighed. "It's locked." Then she remembered something. In her grandmother's bedroom, there was a small jewelry box that always stayed on the dresser. Evelyn hurried upstairs and opened it. Among the rings and old earrings, she found a tiny, antique key tied with a piece of blue ribbon. Her fingers trembled as she brought it back downstairs. The key fit perfectly. Click. The lock opened. Inside the chest was a layer of soft fabric, neatly folded. Beneath it were several items: a leather-bound diary, a photograph of her mother holding a baby, and another sealed envelope. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The woman in the photo was beautiful, long brown hair, green eyes, the same smile Evelyn saw in the mirror every day. But behind her mother stood a man she didn't recognize. His arm was around her mother's shoulders, and his expression looked distant. Evelyn flipped the photo over. On the back, written in her grandmother's handwriting, were the words, "Your mother, Anna, and someone she trusted too much." She opened the second envelope. Inside was another letter. "Evelyn, before your mother died, she made a choice that changed all of our lives." The man in the picture was not who he claimed to be. He brought danger to our family, something we could never fully escape. Your mother tried to protect you from him, but she couldn't protect herself. If you truly wish to understand what happened, find the woman named Clara Johnson. She lives in Ashland, Oregon. She was your mother's closest friend. She knows the truth. Grandma Margaret. Evelyn's hands began to shake. Clara Johnson. She had never heard that name before. But now it was her only clue. She sat on the basement floor, surrounded by pieces of the past. Who was this mysterious man in the photo? What kind of danger had her mother faced? And why did her grandmother hide all this for so long? Evelyn looked around the quiet house, the morning light stretching across the floorboards. She suddenly felt something she hadn't felt in years: determination. She stood up, holding the photograph tightly. "I'm going to find Clara," she whispered. "No matter what it takes." 2 days later, Evelyn was standing beside her small gray car, suitcase packed and coffee in hand. The morning air in Portland, Oregon was cold and fresh. A thin layer of fog floated above the street. She double-checked the address she had found inside her grandmother's letter: Clara Johnson, 118 Maple Grove Lane, Ashland, Oregon. Ashland was about 4 hours south. She'd never been there before, but the name now meant everything. If Clara truly knew the truth about her mother, Evelyn had to hear it. She started the car, the engine humming softly, and pulled onto the highway. The drive was long but peaceful. Mountains lined the horizon, and autumn leaves painted the trees in shades of red and gold. Evelyn's thoughts wandered as she drove. She remembered her grandmother's gentle voice reading bedtime stories. She remembered how every Christmas, her grandma baked apple pies and sang old jazz songs in the kitchen, but mixed with those warm memories was a growing ache. Why had her grandmother kept all this from her? Maybe she thought it was safer. Maybe she was afraid Evelyn wouldn't understand. Evelyn sighed. "You should have trusted me, Grandma," she whispered. Halfway through the trip, she stopped at a small roadside diner near Eugene. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. Inside, the smell of pancakes and coffee filled the air. A few locals sat at the counter chatting quietly. Evelyn ordered a sandwich and sat by the window. She opened her phone and searched for Clara Johnson, Ashland. Several results appeared, but one caught her eye: a Clara M. Johnson, age 74, living just outside town, near the old theater district. "That has to be her," Evelyn murmured. She took a deep breath and continued her journey south. By late afternoon, the landscape changed. The mountains grew closer, and the sunlight turned golden as she entered Ashland, a small, artistic town surrounded by hills and trees. Colorful banners for the Shakespeare Festival hung from lamp-posts, and people walked with warm drinks in hand. Evelyn followed the GPS until she reached a quiet neighborhood lined with maple trees. She parked in front of an old white house with a porch swing and a garden full of roses. The mailbox read, "C. Johnson." Her heart began to race. She sat in the car for a moment, trying to calm her breathing. What if Clara didn't want to talk? What if she didn't even remember her mother? Still, she had come too far to turn back now. Evelyn walked up the front steps and rang the bell. after a few seconds, the door opened slightly. An elderly woman with silver hair and gentle blue eyes peered out. She wore a long cardigan and looked both cautious and curious. "Yes," the woman asked softly. Evelyn swallowed. "Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. Are you Clara Johnson?" The woman's expression changed. She looked at Evelyn closely, her eyes narrowing, studying her face like she was seeing a ghost. Finally, Clara whispered, "You're Anna's daughter, aren't you?" Evelyn froze. "You knew my mother?" Clara opened the door wider. "Come in, child," she said in a trembling voice. "There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you long ago." The warm smell of cinnamon tea filled the living room as Evelyn sat nervously on the old floral couch. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Across from her sat Clara Johnson, a gentle woman in her 70s, her silver hair neatly tied back. Her eyes were kind but carried years of memories, the kind that weigh on the heart. "I never thought I'd see you," Clara began softly. "The last time I saw you, you were just a baby in your mother's arms." Evelyn leaned forward. "You knew my mom well." Clara smiled sadly. "We were like sisters. Your mother, Anna, was one of the brightest people I ever knew. But she got involved with the wrong man. That's when everything started to fall apart." The words sent a chill through Evelyn. "The wrong man? Do you mean the one in the photograph?" Clara nodded. "Yes. His name was Richard Hale. At first, he seemed perfect, charming, smart, and kind. He worked with Anna at the university. Everyone thought he was wonderful." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she continued. "But your grandmother never trusted him. She said there was something cold about his eyes." Evelyn frowned. "What happened between them?" Clara hesitated. Her gaze dropped to the cup in her hands. "Richard was not who he said he was. He was married, Evelyn, married to someone else. Your mother didn't know. When she found out, she was heartbroken." Evelyn's stomach turned. "He lied to her?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "But that wasn't the worst part." Evelyn's breath caught. "There's more." Clara nodded. "After Anna left him, strange things started happening. Someone was following her. She would find letters on her doorstep, angry, threatening ones. One night, her apartment was broken into, but nothing was stolen. She became terrified." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Do you think it was him?" Clara hesitated. "We could never prove it. But the night before your mother died, she called me in tears. She said she had found something that could destroy Richard's reputation forever." "What was it?" Evelyn asked quickly. "I don't know," Clara said softly. "She wouldn't tell me. She only said she was going to meet someone the next morning, and that she might finally be free." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "And that's when she died?" Clara nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "The police called it an accident, said her car lost control on the highway. But Anna was a careful driver. I never believed it. Your grandmother didn't either." Silence filled the room. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock, counting the seconds that seemed to stretch forever. Evelyn stared at the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, my mom might have been murdered." Clara reached out and gently took Evelyn's hand. "I can't say for sure. But there's something else you should know." Evelyn looked up, her eyes full of fear and curiosity. Clara's voice lowered. "Before your grandmother died, she called me. She said she wanted you to have a box, something Anna left behind. She told me it might finally reveal the truth." Evelyn blinked. "A box? Where is it?" Clara stood up slowly. It's in the back room. I kept it safe all these years. I wasn't sure if I'd ever give it to you, but now, I think it's time. Evelyn watched as Clara disappeared into the hallway. Her heart pounded in her chest. A box from her mother, something her grandmother wanted her to find. What could be inside? After a moment, Clara returned, holding a small wooden box wrapped in a faded white cloth. She placed it gently on the table between them. This, she said, is your mother's final message. The wooden box sat on the table like something alive, silent, heavy, and full of secrets. Evelyn stared at it for a long time before she finally whispered, "This belonged to my mother." Clara nodded slowly. Yes. She gave it to your grandmother the day before the accident. Margaret promised to keep it safe until the right time came. Evelyn brushed her fingers over the lid. The wood was smooth and dark, with a tiny brass lock at the front. Do you have the key? Clara smiled faintly and pulled a small keychain from her pocket. A single old-fashioned key dangled from it. I've been keeping it for 25 years, she said softly. I think your mother wanted you to be the one to open it. Evelyn took the key, her hands trembling. The lock clicked open easily. Inside the box were a few items wrapped in yellowed paper, an old cassette tape, several folded letters, and a small silver locket. Evelyn carefully picked up the locket first. It was engraved with 2 initials, A.H., Anna Hale, her mother's married name. Inside the locket was a tiny photograph, her mother holding a baby in her arms. Evelyn recognized her own face instantly. But there was another small picture hidden behind it, faded and cracked, the same mysterious man, Richard Hale. Her stomach twisted. Clara, she asked, her voice tight, was my father? Richard Hale. Clara's eyes filled with emotion. No, sweetheart. He wasn't your father. That's what your grandmother wanted to protect you from. Your real father was someone else, someone good. But Anna never had a chance to tell him about you. Evelyn felt dizzy. Then. Richard wasn't part of our family. Clara shook her head. No. But he wanted to be. He wanted control. Anna left him when she found out about his wife, and he couldn't stand that. She was going to expose him and his business. Evelyn's pulse quickened. What business? Clara took a deep breath. He was running a secret research project. Something illegal, I think, through the university. Anna worked as a lab assistant. She discovered evidence that he was using dangerous materials without permission, falsifying data for money. She told me she had proof, documents, recordings, everything. Evelyn looked down at the old cassette tape in the box. The label read, in her mother's handwriting, "In case something happens to me." Her breath caught. Clara, she said quickly, do you have a tape player? Clara nodded and disappeared into the hallway, returning a minute later with a small portable cassette player, one of those old silver ones from the 90s. They inserted the tape. The machine clicked, then hissed with static, and then, a familiar voice filled the room. Anna's voice, gentle, warm, and trembling. If you're hearing this, it means I couldn't stop him. Richard has become dangerous. I have copies of the files, evidence of what he's done. I'm leaving them with someone I trust. Please, whoever finds this, don't let him destroy everything. Tell my daughter that I love her. The tape ended with a soft click. Evelyn sat frozen. Her mother's voice, after all these years, felt like a ghost reaching across time. Tears filled her eyes. She knew, she whispered. She knew something would happen to her. Clara nodded sadly. She tried to protect you, Evelyn. She and your grandmother both did. Evelyn took a deep breath and looked at the box again. Beneath the letters was a folded newspaper clipping. An article headline read, University Research Scandal Linked to Missing Data, Professor Richard Hale Resigns. Her mother had succeeded. She had exposed him, but it had cost her everything. Evelyn's eyes burned with anger and sorrow. He ruined her life. And he got away with it. Clara hesitated. Maybe not completely. Richard disappeared soon after the investigation. No one's seen him in decades. Some say he moved east, others say he changed his name. Evelyn clenched her fists. Then I'll find him. He deserves to face the truth. Clara looked at her with both fear and pride. Be careful, Evelyn. The truth can be dangerous, just like it was for your mother. That night, Evelyn sat in her small motel room in Ashland. The box rested on the table beside her. She replayed the tape again, just to hear her mother's voice one more time. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and for a moment, she thought she heard her grandmother's voice, too. You're ready to know. Evelyn closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would start searching for Richard Hale. The past wasn't finished yet. The next morning, the first light of dawn touched the hills of Ashland, Oregon, painting the sky in pale orange. Evelyn hadn't slept much. The sound of her mother's voice from the cassette still echoed in her head. She sat at the motel desk, laptop open, typing Richard Hale, Oregon into the search bar. Pages of results appeared, most from decades ago, news reports, university archives, and one short article from 1999 titled, Disgraced Professor Leaves Oregon After Scandal, Destination Unknown. No one had heard from him since. It was as if he'd simply vanished. Evelyn rubbed her temples. There has to be more, she whispered. Then she remembered the newspaper clipping she found in the box, the one about the scandal. She zoomed in on the photo. Behind Richard Hale, in the corner of the image, was another man's face, blurred, but familiar somehow. She opened a new tab and searched his name from the caption, Dr. Mark Ellison Research Department. The article said he still worked at a private lab outside Medford, just 40 miles north of Ashland. Her pulse quickened. Maybe he knows something. A few hours later, Evelyn parked her car in front of a low, modern building surrounded by pine trees. The sign out front read, Ellison Biotech Research Center. She walked inside, clutching her bag nervously. A woman at the front desk smiled politely. Hi, I'm looking for Dr. Mark Ellison. Is he available? The receptionist checked her screen. Do you have an appointment? Evelyn hesitated. No, but it's important. She stopped herself, unsure what to say. I'm doing research about former university faculty. The receptionist nodded slowly. I'll see if he's in. A few minutes later, a tall man in his 60s stepped into the lobby. His hair was gray, his face lined but kind. He studied Evelyn curiously. Yes. Can I help you? Dr. Ellison, she began softly, my name is Evelyn Carter. I'm the daughter of Anna Carter, formerly Anna Hale. The man froze. His expression changed instantly, shock, then something close to guilt. He glanced around, then motioned her toward his office. Inside, books and scientific journals filled the shelves. A photo of a younger version of him with several colleagues, including Richard Hale, hung on the wall. I never thought I'd hear that name again, he said, sitting down heavily. Anna was special. Smart. Kind. What happened to her was a tragedy. Evelyn leaned forward. You knew about Richard, didn't you? About what he was doing? Dr. Ellison sighed deeply. Yes. Everyone did, but no one wanted to get involved. Richard was powerful. He had friends in high places, funding from private investors. Your mother found out he was falsifying safety reports to keep money coming in. When she tried to report it, she became a target. So he threatened her. Ellison looked down. More than that. He followed her. He had people watching her apartment. I told her to leave town, but she refused. She said she wouldn't be afraid. Evelyn's voice broke. And then she died. He nodded slowly. I read about it the next day. It didn't feel like an accident. But I couldn't prove anything. Silence filled the room. Then Evelyn asked quietly, "Do you know what happened to him?" Ellison hesitated before speaking. After the scandal, Richard changed his name. I heard he moved to the East Coast, maybe Vermont or New Hampshire. Someone said he started a small medical consulting business under the name Richard Hayes. Evelyn's heart began to pound. So he's still alive? Ellison nodded grimly. If you're planning to find him, be careful. He's not the kind of man who forgives the past. Evelyn stood slowly. Thank you, Dr. Ellison. I just want answers. My mother deserves justice. As she turned to leave, Ellison said quietly, "Your mother would be proud of you. She always believed the truth mattered, no matter the cost." That evening, back at her motel, Evelyn traced the letters of a new note she had written in her notebook. Richard Hale, Richard Hayes, Vermont. The road ahead felt uncertain, dangerous, even, but for the first time, she felt closer to her mother than ever before. Outside, the wind whispered against the motel window, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. Evelyn looked at her mother's photo and whispered, "I'm coming for the truth, Mom. I promise." The rain had returned to Oregon, soft and steady, as Evelyn Carter stood at the airport gate with a small suitcase in her hand. Her flight to Burlington, Vermont was boarding soon. It had been 3 days since she spoke to Dr. Mark Ellison. His words replayed in her mind like a haunting echo. Richard changed his name. He might be living in Vermont, under the name Richard Hayes. That was all she needed to know. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not even Clara. Something about this trip felt too personal, too fragile. This wasn't just about finding a man. It was about facing the shadow that had hung over her family for decades. The plane took off into a gray sky. Evelyn stared out the window, watching the world shrink beneath her. The further she flew from Oregon, the closer she felt to the truth. She thought about her mother again, Anna's laugh, her soft voice on the cassette, and the courage it must have taken to stand up against someone powerful. Evelyn's eyes burned with emotion. She didn't run, Evelyn whispered to herself. So neither will I. When the plane landed, Vermont felt like another world. The air was colder, the trees bare from early winter. The town of Burlington was quiet, the streets lined with little cafes, bookstores, and antique shops. Evelyn checked into a small inn overlooking Lake Champlain. From her window, she could see the dark water stretching into the distance, surrounded by snow-touched hills. That night, she opened her laptop and searched Richard Hayes, medical consultant, Vermont. After several pages, one result caught her eye. Hayes Medical Consulting LLC, located in a small town called Shelburne, just 15 minutes south of Burlington. Her heart skipped a beat. The company had been registered 15 years ago. 15 years, she murmured. That's just after he disappeared. The next morning, Evelyn drove through the misty Vermont countryside. The roads wound between farms and forests, and every turn seemed to bring her closer to the truth. Finally, she reached a small office building with a simple sign, Hayes Consulting. Her pulse quickened as she parked the car. She sat for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. What if it's him? What if he remembers my mother? After a deep breath, she stepped out and walked to the door. Inside, the office was quiet, modern but modest. A receptionist greeted her politely. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment with Mr. Hayes?" Evelyn hesitated. "No, but could you tell him an old family friend would like to see him?" The receptionist looked uncertain. "I'll check if he's available." She disappeared down the hall. Evelyn's heart thudded in her chest. She could almost hear it echoing in the silence. Moments later, the receptionist returned. "He'll see you now." Evelyn followed her down the corridor. At the end was a glass door with a nameplate, Richard Hayes, Director. The door opened slowly, and there he was. An older man stood behind the desk, tall, silver-haired, dressed neatly in a dark suit. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and cold. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't breathe. Even after all these years, she recognized the face from the old photograph. Richard Hale. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. "Can I help you, young lady?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "You probably don't remember me," she said quietly, "but you knew my mother, Anna Hale." The man's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. Then his voice softened. "Anna," he leaned back in his chair. "It's been a long time since I've heard that name." "Yes," Evelyn said, steadying her voice. "And it's time you told me the truth about what happened to her." For a moment, silence filled the office. The ticking of a clock seemed painfully loud. Then Richard stood up, walking slowly toward the window. He spoke without looking at her. "You shouldn't have come here, Evelyn." She froze. "So you do remember me?" He turned, his face hard. "Some things are better left buried." Evelyn's heart raced. "You ruined her life. You threatened her, didn't you? You made her afraid." Richard's voice rose slightly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell me," she shouted. "Tell me what really happened to my mother." For the first time, his mask cracked. There was something like regret, or guilt, in his eyes. He whispered, "She was supposed to leave me alone. I warned her." Evelyn stepped closer. "You warned her? Or you silenced her?" Richard turned away again. "You need to go. Now." But Evelyn didn't move. Her voice shook, but it was strong. "I'm not leaving until I get the truth." Richard's jaw tightened. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, "If you really want answers, meet me tomorrow morning. There's a cafe by the lake, Harbor Point Cafe. Come alone. You'll get what you came for." Evelyn stared at him, unsure if it was a threat or a promise. "Fine," she said finally. "Tomorrow." As she turned to leave, he called after her softly, "You look just like her." The words followed her all the way back to her car. That night, in her small inn by the lake, Evelyn sat awake by the window, watching the water shimmer in the moonlight. Her hands trembled as she replayed the conversation in her mind. Tomorrow, she would finally learn what happened to her mother, but deep inside, she could feel it. Whatever waited at that cafe would change everything. The next morning was cold and quiet in Shelburne, Vermont. A thin mist drifted across Lake Champlain, and the sun was a pale gold behind the clouds. Evelyn barely slept. Every hour of the night she kept hearing Richard's voice, "Meet me at Harbor Point Cafe. Come alone." Now, as she walked toward the small cafe by the water, her stomach churned with nervous energy. The sound of waves brushing against the dock was the only thing keeping her calm. She pushed open the cafe door. A bell chimed softly above her head. Inside, the smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air. Only a few customers sat quietly by the windows. In the corner, Richard Hayes, or rather, Richard Hale, was waiting. He looked different in daylight. Older. Tired. The hard edge in his face had softened, replaced by something almost human, guilt, maybe, or shame. "Evelyn," he said quietly as she sat across from him. "Thank you for coming." She kept her coat on and folded her arms. "You said you'd tell me the truth. That's the only reason I'm here." He nodded, looking down at his cup. "I owe your mother that much. And maybe I owe you." For a long moment, he didn't speak. The hum of the coffee machine filled the silence. Then he began, "Your mother, Anna, worked for me at the research lab in Portland. She was brilliant, smarter than anyone else on my team. But she discovered something she wasn't supposed to. Evelyn leaned forward. What do you mean? There was an experiment, a medical trial that wasn't fully legal. We were under pressure to produce results. I signed off on something that should never have been approved. Anna found the data and wanted to go to the authorities. So you stopped her, Evelyn said sharply. Richard's hands trembled slightly. I tried to reason with her. I begged her not to ruin everything. But she was determined. He paused, his voice low. One night, we argued in the parking lot. I told her she didn't understand what she was doing, that she'd destroy people's careers, maybe even her own safety. I said things I shouldn't have. Angry things. And then, she left. Evelyn's voice cracked. And what happened after that? She disappeared. Everyone said it was an accident. Was it? Richard closed his eyes. She called me the next day. Said she was scared, someone was following her. I thought she was just upset. I told her to come in and talk. But she never arrived. He swallowed hard. 2 days later, her car was found near the old bridge. They said she drowned, but I never believed it. Evelyn's hands shook. You knew something happened to her, and you did nothing. Richard looked pained. I didn't know who was behind it. I thought, maybe the company wanted to silence her. When I started asking questions, I was told to stop. So I changed my name, moved across the country, and disappeared. He met her eyes for the first time. I've lived with that guilt for 20 years. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. You let my father believe she just left. You let me grow up not knowing any of this. I thought I was protecting you, he said softly. If I had spoken up back then, you and your father might have been targets too. Those people, they were powerful. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside, the lake shimmered under the pale morning light. Evelyn finally whispered, do you know who they were? The ones who followed her. Richard nodded slowly. One name. That's all I ever found. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with age. Inside was a single business card. It read, James W. Corbin Biotech. Evelyn stared at it. Corbin Biotech, that's still operating in Boston. Richard nodded. Yes. And if you want the real truth, that's where you'll find it. Evelyn took the card, her fingers trembling. Boston. A new city. Another step deeper into a secret that had already destroyed one life. She looked up at Richard. Are you going to help me? His voice was quiet. I can't. They still watch. But I can warn you, once you start digging, they won't let you stop. Evelyn stood, her eyes steady and fierce. I'm not afraid of them anymore. My mother deserves justice. Richard gave a sad smile. You really are her daughter. As Evelyn walked out of the cafe, the wind from the lake hit her face. It was cold but cleansing. She looked out across the water, whispering to herself, I'll finish what you started, Mom. The card fluttered slightly in her hand as she stared toward the horizon, east, toward Boston. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. 3 days later, the cold wind of Boston, Massachusetts whipped across Boylston Street, carrying the smell of roasted coffee and the sea. Evelyn Carter pulled her coat tighter as she stepped out of the taxi, her heart pounding. In her pocket was the old business card. James W. Corbin Biotech. That name had followed her from her grandmother's attic, to Oregon, Vermont, and now here, the city where the truth waited. Corbin Biotech was located in a tall glass building near the harbor. From the outside, it looked clean, modern, successful, the kind of place that smiled for the cameras, but hid secrets in the basement. Evelyn walked into the lobby. Everything smelled of polished floors and expensive perfume. A security guard greeted her. "Good morning, miss. Do you have an appointment?" She smiled politely. "Yes. With Mr. Corbin. I'm a journalist, Evelyn Carter." The guard typed something into the computer, frowned slightly, and then nodded. "All right, he's expecting you. Elevator to the 14th floor." Evelyn blinked in surprise. Expecting me? As the elevator climbed, her reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls, nervous, determined, a little afraid. When the doors opened, she stepped into a sleek office space. At the end of the hallway stood a man in his late 50s, tall, confident, with silver hair and a calm, unreadable expression. "James Corbin, Miss Carter," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Evelyn froze. "You know who I am?" "Of course. You've been asking about your mother, Anna Hale. You've spoken to Richard Hale. You've stirred up quite a few ghosts, haven't you?" She took a step forward. "Then tell me what happened to her." Corbin smiled faintly and gestured toward a seat. "You want the truth. You may not like it." Evelyn sat, her pulse racing. He began slowly, his tone almost gentle. 22 years ago, your mother was part of a project called Genesis, a genetic therapy experiment. It was revolutionary and risky. Richard Hale was the lead scientist. But he and I disagreed on how to proceed." He paused, pouring himself a glass of water. "Anna discovered some irregularities in the results. She wanted to stop the project. She thought we were falsifying data. She was right." "So you silenced her?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaking. Corbin's eyes glimmered. "I didn't need to. She was reckless. She took files, made copies, threatened to expose everything. That made her a liability. Someone had to take care of it." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What do you mean, take care of it?" Corbin leaned back, his tone cold now. "You already know what happened. You just don't want to admit it." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. "You killed her." He didn't deny it. "I protected the company. I protected the work. And in the end, I protected the future. Look around you. Corbin Biotech is a global leader now. Everything we've built came from that research." She stood up, her voice trembling with rage. "You built it on my mother's blood." At that moment, the office door opened, and Richard Hale walked in. Evelyn gasped. "What are you doing here?" Richard looked pale but determined. "I couldn't let you face him alone." Corbin chuckled softly. "Ah, Richard. Always the guilty conscience." Richard's voice shook. "You told me she'd gone too far, that she'd left. You lied to me." "I did what was necessary," Corbin said calmly. "And you kept your silence. We both benefited." Richard's fists clenched. "Not anymore." Evelyn pulled out her phone. "I've been recording this entire conversation." Corbin froze for the first time. "You what?" "I'm a journalist, remember," she said, voice steady. "Everything you just said, the project, the cover-up, my mother's death, it's all on record." Richard turned to her, astonished. "Evelyn," Corbin's calm mask shattered. "You think anyone will believe you? You have no proof beyond your little recording." Evelyn held up an old USB drive. "My grandmother kept my mother's files. The real data. The documents your lawyers buried. I have it all." Corbin's face darkened. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Evelyn took a step back toward the door. "Maybe not. But I know what you are, a murderer." Suddenly, Richard moved between them. "You're not touching her," he said quietly. Corbin's jaw tightened. "You'll ruin us both, Richard." Richard nodded. Then maybe that's what we deserve. Evelyn turned, her hands shaking, and ran from the office. Security guards shouted as she rushed through the lobby, heart pounding, the recording still running in her pocket. Outside, cold Boston wind hit her face like a slap. She kept running, down the street, across the crosswalk, into the crowd. For the first time, she wasn't running from the past. She was running toward justice. That night, in a small hotel near the harbor, Evelyn uploaded the files, the recording, and her mother's story to several major news outlets. When she hit send, she whispered through tears, "It's over, Mom. They can't hide you anymore." Outside, the city lights reflected on the dark water, calm, endless, and free. Boston woke up to chaos. By morning, the name Corbin Biotech was on every news channel, every website, every radio broadcast. The headline read, "Whistleblower Files Reveal Cover-Up and Death Linked to Genetic Experiment." Evelyn Carter's story had spread across the country overnight. Her mother's files, the research, the emails, the evidence, were now public. The recording of James Corbin's confession had gone viral. For the first time in 22 years, Anna Hale's name was spoken with honor. She wasn't forgotten anymore. She was remembered as the woman who tried to tell the truth. Evelyn stood by the window of her small hotel room, watching the sunrise spill golden light over the harbor. The air felt cleaner, freer. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, reporters, lawyers, activists, all wanting to talk to her. But she wasn't ready for the spotlight. For her, this wasn't about fame. It was about justice and healing. Later that day, she walked along the harbor where seagulls circled the water and the wind smelled like salt and hope. Her phone rang. It was Clara, her grandmother's old friend. "Evelyn, honey. I saw the news. You did it. She'd be so proud of you." Evelyn smiled softly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I didn't do it alone, Clara. Grandma helped me. She left me the letter, the clues. And Mom, she never gave up, even when she was gone." There was a pause on the line. "She's at peace now," Clara said gently. "And maybe you can be too." That evening, Evelyn went back to Oregon. The rain had returned, soft and silver, just like the day she found the letter in the attic. Her father was waiting for her at the old house. He looked older than she remembered, tired, but relieved. When she stepped inside, he opened his arms without a word. For a moment, they just stood there, holding each other. Then he whispered, "You found her, didn't you?" Evelyn nodded, her voice breaking. "I found the truth, Dad. She didn't run away. She was brave." Tears filled his eyes. "I always knew there was more. I just couldn't face it." "You don't have to anymore," she said softly. That night, Evelyn went up to the attic one last time. The same wooden box sat there, empty except for a photo of her mother, smiling in the sunlight, holding baby Evelyn in her arms. She placed a small note inside the box, and closed it gently. It read, "We found the truth, Mom. You can rest now. Love, Evelyn." Then she whispered into the quiet air, "Thank you for never giving up on me." A few weeks later, the government announced an official investigation. James Corbin was arrested. Richard Hale testified, finally telling the full story. Evelyn didn't attend the trial. Instead, she began writing a book, not about revenge, but about courage, truth, and forgiveness. She called it The Light After the Storm. Her story became a message of hope, proof that even after decades of silence, truth still finds its voice. Months later, Evelyn stood on the cliffs above the Oregon coast, the wind lifting her hair. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, powerful, untamed, alive. She whispered, "You were right, Mom. The truth matters. Always." The waves crashed against the rocks below, like an answer from somewhere beyond, and for the first time in her life, Evelyn felt free.